Dear students, today we are going to study about the hormonal control of reproductive function. In the previous class, we have seen about the ovarian cycle and the menstrual cycle, and today we will be discussing about how the hormones control these reproductive cycles. Now let us see the hormones. The hormonal control of reproductive function in mammalian females. There are different hormones which control reproductive function in mammalian females, and that includes the hormones which control menstrual cycle and ovarian cycle, then the hormonal control of pregnancy and childbirth, and hormonal control of lactation. And we will be seeing about the hormones which control menstrual cycle and ovarian cycle today. And the hormonal control of pregnancy, childbirth and lactation will be discussed in the next class. This is the slide showing the hormonal control of menstrual cycle. The pituitary gland is producing the follicle stimulating hormone and the luteinizing hormone. These are the gonadotropins which are secreted by the anterior pituitary gland, that is follicle stimulating hormone or FSH and luteinizing hormone or LH. And this follicle stimulating hormone is carried by the blood to the ovary, and in the ovary the follicle stimulating hormone is stimulating the development of ovarian follicles. We have discussed about the ovarian follicles in the last class. The ovarian follicles are aggregates of ovarian follicular cells, and these ovarian follicles, during the ovarian cycle, this ovarian follicle, one of the ovarian follicles will develop as the mature Graafian follicle, and one of the cell in this Graafian follicle will develop as the ovum, and the development of this Graafian follicle is stimulated by the follicle stimulating hormone, and this follicle stimulating hormone is stimulating the secretion of the hormone estrogen by the ovarian follicles. And this estrogen, during the first phase of the ovarian cycle, that is before ovulation, this estrogen is stimulating the anterior pituitary gland to produce more amount of follicle stimulating hormone by a positive feedback mechanism. Then this estrogen that is secreted by the ovarian follicles is doing the repair and regeneration of the uterine endometrium, which has been eroded during the menstrual phase. So after menses, the uterine endometrium is repaired and regenerated under the influence of the hormone estrogen, which is secreted by the ovarian follicles. Then after the on the 14th day, this ovarian follicle, the Graafian follicle, will undergo rupture and the ovum will be released, and the process is called ovulation. And after the ovulation, this estrogen hormone will inhibit the pituitary gland and prevent the secretion or decrease the secretion of follicle stimulating hormone, that is to prevent additional development of ovarian follicles, so that additional ovulation is prevented. So after the ovulation, now the function of estrogen is to prepare the uterus for the for receiving the fertilized egg, or for receiving the embryo. The uterine wall has to be prepared. So that is the function of the estrogen, and the estrogen is inhibiting the further secretion of follicle stimulating hormone after ovulation, so that additional ovulation is prevented. Then after ovulation, the ruptured Graafian follicle is developing as the corpus luteum, and it is producing the hormone progesterone, and together with the follicle stimulating hormone, this luteinizing hormone is also assisting in the ovulation. It is also assisting in the rupture of the Graafian follicle, that is the ovulation is actually stimulated by the luteinizing hormone. Then after ovulation, the graphene follicle is developing as the another endometrium developing as another endocrine gland, which is called the corpus luteum, and this corpus luteum is producing the hormone progesterone, and this progesterone, it is also assisting in the further development of the uterine endometrium, so that the uterine endometrium will become highly vascularized, then it will develop the uterine glands, and the uterine endometrium will now become a soft tissue and highly secretory tissue, which is highly nutritive for the for receiving the embryo. So that is the function of progesterone. Now let us see the cyclic changes in the secretion of these gonadotropins and the ovarian hormones. The gonadotropic hormones are the follicle stimulating hormone and the luteinizing hormone. These hormones are secreted by the anterior pituitary gland. Here you can see the changes which are taking place to the graphene follicle, to the ovarian follicle in the ovarian cycle. And in this section you can see the hormones which are secreted by the ovaries, that is the estrogen and the progesterone. And here you can see the changes which are taking place in the uterine endometrium during a menstrual cycle. First, at the beginning of the menstrual cycle and at the beginning of the ovarian cycle, there is the amount of FSH is higher than the amount of LH. This blue line indicates the secretion of follicle stimulating hormone, and this red line or the magenta line indicates the secretion of luteinizing hormone or LH. So the amount of FSH is higher than the LH at the beginning of the ovarian cycle and the menstrual cycle, and this follicle stimulating hormone is stimulating the development of ovarian follicles. So the ovarian follicle is developing as the graphene follicle. Here you can see the ovum developing inside the graphene follicle. So this is the 14th day, that is the day of ovulation. So just before ovulation there is a sudden increase in the amount of follicle stimulating hormone, and there is also a sudden surge in the amount of LH that is produced. So here you can see the amount of LH is higher than the amount of follicle stimulating hormone that is occurring just before ovulation. And before ovulation the amount of estrogen is higher, and towards the period of ovulation you can see an increase in the amount of estrogen that is produced. And here you can see the menses, that is eroding of the uterine endometrium. This is the first phase of the menstrual cycle, that is the menses, and after that a new endometrium is produced under the influence of this estrogen hormone produced by the ovary. So a new endometrium is produced, and on the 14th day the graphene follicle is ruptured and the ovum is released, and this process is called ovulation. And after ovulation you can see there is a decrease in the amount of FSH and LH. So the production of FSH and LH is decreased after ovulation, and this is because of the inhibition by estrogen and progesterone, so as to prevent additional development of ovarian follicles, and additional ovulation is prevented during this cycle. So the secretion of FSH and LH is inhibited by the estrogen and progesterone after ovulation. And after ovulation, here you can see the ruptured graphene follicle is developing as the endocrine gland, which is called the corpus luteum, and this corpus luteum is producing the hormone progesterone. So there is an increase in the amount of progesterone after ovulation, and this progesterone together with estrogen is doing the is influencing the development of uterine endometrium. So the progesterone and the estrogen, they together cause the further development of the uterine uterine endometrium, so that the endometrium becomes highly vascularized and it becomes highly secretory by the development of endometrial glands, and so now the uterine endometrium becomes a nutritive bed where the embryo can adhere and can get implanted and grow. So the uterine endometrium is undergoing further development under the influence of progesterone mainly, and also under the influence of estrogen, and this continues after the ovulation. And if the female is not becoming pregnant, then there is you can see there is a decrease in the amount of progesterone and the amount of estrogen that is secreted. This is because if the female is not becoming pregnant, this corpus luteum will regress and it will degenerate to form the body which is called corpus albicans. So since the corpus luteum is undergoing degeneration, the progesterone secretion and the estrogen secretion will decrease, and this will result in the eroding of the uterine endometrium, that is called the menses. And if pregnancy occurs, this corpus luteum will be maintained and the progesterone secretion will also continue and the uterine endometrium will not erode. But if the female is not becoming pregnant, the progesterone secretion and the estrogen secretion will decrease and the uterine endometrium will be eroded, and it will result in menstrual flow which is called menses. So this is how the gonadotropins from the anterior pituitary gland and the ovarian hormones control the ovarian cycle and the menstrual cycle. We will discuss about the hormonal control of pregnancy and childbirth and the hormonal control of lactation in the next class. Thank you.